The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room Daniel Porter had ever seen. Giant pillars of white stone rose toward a ceiling so high it seemed to touch the stars themselves. Delegates from over 100 alien species sat in floating chairs arranged in a great circle, all of them looking down at the single human standing in the center of the floor. Daniel had served as Earth's ambassador to the galactic community for 15 years. He had learned to read alien expressions, to understand their customs, and to navigate their complicated politics. But today, something felt wrong. The Empire had requested this formal meeting, and the Never did anything without a hidden purpose. High King sat on a throne made of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. He was tall and thin, with silver blue skin and 4 eyes that moved independently of each other. They were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. Their empire had existed for 100,000 years, and they looked at humanity the way a grown man might look at a baby trying to walk. The king raised one long hand, and the chamber fell silent. "We have gathered here today to strengthen the bond between the Empire and the humans of Earth," announced. His voice was cold and smooth like ice. "The humans have requested closer relations with our people. We have decided to grant this request." Daniel felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps this would be good news after all. Perhaps they were ready to share their advanced technology or open new trade routes. "As a sign of our generosity," the king continued, "I present to humanity a gift of great significance. I give to them my 7th daughter, Princess, to serve as a permanent liaison between our peoples." The reaction was immediate. Laughter exploded from every corner of the chamber. The ambassador, a creature with 8 legs and clicking mandibles, made a sound like breaking glass that passed for humor among his kind. The delegate, whose body was made of writhing tentacles, shook with amusement. Even species that Daniel had considered friendly were smiling or making their own versions of laughter. Daniel understood at once, and his heart sank. Among the birth order carried great meaning. First children were destined for leadership. Second children became warriors. Third children served as priests. But 7th children, especially 7th daughters, were considered cursed. Old legends claimed that 7th daughters brought misfortune wherever they went. Ships carrying them would sink. Crops grown in their presence would die. Any house that sheltered them would fall to ruin. It was superstition and nonsense, but they believed it completely. 7th daughters were hidden away in isolated towers, forbidden from participating in society, treated as shameful secrets to be forgotten. King was not giving humanity an honor. He was dumping his unwanted trash on them and calling it a gift. He was insulting Earth in front of the entire galaxy, and everyone knew it. The doors at the far end of the chamber opened, and guards escorted a young woman into the room. They walked several steps away from her, as if being too close might bring them bad luck. Princess was beautiful in a sad and lonely way. She had her father's silver blue skin and large violet eyes that seemed too big for her thin face. But where the king wore robes of gold and jewels, she wore simple gray cloth. Where the king stood tall with pride, she walked with her head down and her shoulders bent. She looked like a person who had been told her whole life that she was worthless and had finally started to believe it. The laughter continued as she took her place beside Daniel. He could see her hands trembling. Daniel looked around the chamber at all the smiling faces. He saw the delegates exchanging knowing glances. He saw the still shaking with amusement. He saw King watching with cold satisfaction, waiting to see how the primitive humans would react to being mocked. And Daniel made a choice. He turned to face Princess and dropped to one knee. Then he bowed his head low, offering her the deepest sign of respect that human culture possessed. The laughter stopped. "Your Royal Highness," Daniel said in a voice loud enough for the entire chamber to hear, "on behalf of Earth and all of humanity, I am honored to accept this gift. We thank King for his generosity and wisdom. Princess will be welcomed among our people not as a servant or a burden, but as a treasured friend and ally. He rose and looked directly at the king. His 4 eyes had narrowed with confusion and something that might have been worry. "We understand the great sacrifice you make by sending your daughter to live among us," Daniel continued. "We promise to treat her with all the respect and kindness she deserves. She will want for nothing. She will be protected with our lives, and she will always have a home among humanity." The chamber was completely silent now. No one was laughing anymore. Daniel turned back too. She was staring at him with an expression he could not read. Her violet eyes were wide, and her lips were slightly parted. No one had ever spoken about her with kindness before. No one had ever suggested that she deserved respect. "Your Highness," Daniel said gently, "would you do me the honor of accompanying me back to Earth? I believe you will find our world very different from what you have known. We are a young species and we have much to learn, but we also have much to offer. We have blue oceans and green forests. We have music and art and stories, and we have people who will be very happy to meet you." Opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had been trained since birth to expect rejection and disgust. She did not know how to respond to acceptance and warmth. She looked at her father. King sat frozen on his throne, his expression unreadable. He had expected the humans to be embarrassed. He had expected them to hide his cursed daughter away and pretend she did not exist. He had not expected them to treat her like a princess. Looked back at Daniel. Slowly, very slowly, she nodded. "I would be honored, Ambassador," she whispered. Her voice was soft and rough, like she had not used it in a long time. Daniel smiled at her, a real smile full of warmth. Then he offered her his arm, the way a gentleman would escort a lady in old Earth movies. Hesitated. No one had ever touched her willingly, but something in Daniel's eyes made her trust him. She placed her hand on his arm and he led her toward the exit. As they walked past the silent delegates, Daniel paused beside the ambassador who had laughed the loudest. "Thank you for attending today," Daniel said politely. "I hope you enjoyed the show, but remember this moment. Remember how you laughed at her, because one day you may find yourself needing humanity's help, and we will remember too." They said nothing. Daniel and walked out of the chamber together, leaving behind a room full of confused and worried aliens who were just beginning to realize that they might have made a terrible mistake. The transport ship broke through the clouds and pressed her face against the window like a small child seeing snow for the first time. Below her stretched an ocean so blue it hurt her eyes. She had never seen so much water in her life. Her was a place of ice and gray stone, where the sky was always heavy with clouds and the sun rarely showed its face. But Earth was different. Earth was alive. Green forests covered rolling hills. Rivers cut silver paths through valleys. Cities sparkled in the sunlight, and tiny boats moved across the water like insects on a pond. Could not stop staring. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Ambassador Daniel Porter sat beside her, watching her reaction with a gentle smile. He had sent a message ahead to prepare for her arrival, asking his people to make her feel welcome. He hoped they would understand. The ship landed on a small platform near a rocky coastline. The air that rushed in when the doors opened was cool and salty, carrying the smell of the ocean. Breathed it in and felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to realize it was happiness. A woman stood waiting at the edge of the platform. She had curly red hair that the wind kept blowing across her face, and she wore simple clothes in bright colors. When she saw step off the ship, she did something completely unexpected. She ran forward and wrapped in a hug. Froze. No one had ever hugged her before. On her, people avoided touching her. They believed her curse might spread through physical contact. But this strange human woman was squeezing her tightly, as if they were old friends reuniting after years apart. "You must be Princess," the woman said, finally letting go. "I am Grace. I will be helping you settle in here. Welcome to Earth. Welcome to Maine. Oh, you must be exhausted from your journey. Are you hungry? I made soup. Actually, I made a lot of food. I was nervous, so I cooked all morning. Do eat soup. I really should have researched that. I also have sandwiches and pie and about 14 different snacks. Did not know how to respond. Grace talked very fast, and her face was so open and friendly that it made uncomfortable. She was waiting for the trick, the moment when Grace would reveal that this kindness was a joke. But the trick never came. Grace drove to a small house overlooking the ocean. It was not a palace or a government building. It was just a house, with a garden full of flowers and a cat sleeping on the porch. Ambassador Porter had explained that he wanted to have a real home, not a prison dressed up as a diplomatic residence. Inside, the house was warm and cozy, lined the walls, filled with old paper books that smelled like dust and time. A fireplace crackled in the living room. The kitchen was small but bright, and the soup that Grace had made filled the whole house with a delicious smell. Ate 3 bowls of soup. She had never tasted anything like it. On her food had been delivered through a slot in her door. It was always cold and bland, just enough to keep her alive. But this soup was hot and rich, full of vegetables and herbs and love. Grace watched her eat with a satisfied smile. She did not ask questions or demand anything. She just let eat in peace. Over the following weeks, Grace introduced to the simple pleasures of human life. They walked along the beach, collecting shells and watching the waves crash against the rocks. They visited a farmer's market, where strangers smiled at and offered her free samples of cheese and honey and fresh bread. They went to a small restaurant where an old man played guitar and sang songs about love and loss and hope. One day, a little girl with pigtails ran up to at the market. She could not have been more than 5 years old, and she stared up at with huge, curious eyes. "Your skin is so pretty," the girl said. "Are you a mermaid?" Did not know what a mermaid was, but before she could answer, the girl grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a booth selling painted seashells. "Mommy, mommy, look, I found a mermaid, can we keep her?" The girl's mother apologized for her daughter's behavior but told her it was fine. More than fine. It was wonderful. This child had no fear of her, no superstition about seventh daughters and curses. She just saw a person with pretty blue skin and wanted to be friends. That night sat on the porch of her little house, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors she had never imagined. Grace sat beside her, drinking tea and listening to the waves. "Your people do not fear me," said quietly. It was not a question. Grace looked surprised. "Why would we fear you?" "I am seventh born. Among my kind, seventh daughters are believed to bring misfortune. Ships that carry us will sink. Crops that we touch will die. My own mother refused to look at me after I was born. She said my eyes were cursed." Grace was silent for a long moment. The sunset faded to purple and then to dark blue. Stars began to appear overhead, more stars than had ever seen on her cloudy. Grace said finally, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. What your people believe about seventh daughters is wrong. It is not just wrong, it is stupid. There is no curse. There is no bad luck. You are just a person, same as anyone else." Shook her head. "You do not understand, the legends say." "The legends are lies," Grace interrupted gently. "People make up stories to explain things they do not understand. They blame innocent people for bad luck that was going to happen anyway. Your mother's refusal to look at you says nothing about you and everything about her. She missed out on knowing her own daughter. That is her loss." Grace reached out and took his hand. Her grip was warm and firm. "And it is our gain," Grace said, "because we found you and we are not letting you go. You are not cursed, you are a gift, and the humans of Earth are very, very glad you are here." Stared at Grace for a long time. Then, for the first time since she was a small child, she began to cry. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, tears of years of loneliness finally breaking open. Grace held her hand through all of it, and when the tears were done, she made more soup. Far away, in the cold halls of the palace, King received reports from his spies on Earth. The humans were not hiding his cursed daughter. They were treating her with honor. They were calling her friend and guest and ally. Their news programs showed her walking on beaches and visiting markets and smiling. Smiling, his seventh daughter was smiling. Crushed the report in his fist. This was not how it was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to be embarrassed by his gift. They were supposed to hide her away and regret ever asking for closer ties with his empire. But instead, they were acting like he had given them something precious. The king began to wonder if he had made a very serious mistake. 6 months had passed since arrived on Earth, and she had changed in ways she never thought possible. She smiled now. She laughed. She had learned to bake cookies, though Grace said she still needed practice. She had made friends among the humans who lived in the small coastal town, and they had stopped seeing her as an alien princess and started seeing her as just the tall blue woman who liked to collect seashells and drink too much tea. But was growing restless. She did not want to be just a guest forever. She wanted to contribute, to give something back to the people who had given her so much. One morning, she asked Ambassador Porter if there was something useful she could do. Daniel thought about it for a moment, then made a phone call. 2 days later, found herself at a place called MIT, standing in a laboratory full of machines she did not recognize and equations written on whiteboards that covered every wall. A man named Dr. Cole greeted her at the door. He was young for a human scientist, with messy brown hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He looked tired but excited, like someone who had been chasing a dream for too long. Ambassador Porter said you might be able to help us, said, leading her through the lab. We have been trying to build a fusion reactor for decades. Fusion power could solve all of Earth's energy problems. Clean, unlimited energy from the same process that powers the sun. But we cannot make it work. The reaction always breaks down before we can capture enough power. He showed her their latest attempt. A massive machine filled with magnets and wires that hummed with barely contained energy. Studied it for a long time without saying anything. "May I see your equations?" she asked. Handed her a tablet containing years of research. Sat down in a corner of the lab and began to read. She did not speak for 3 hours. The scientists watched her nervously, wondering if they had made a mistake inviting this alien princess into their secret project. Then stood up and walked to an empty whiteboard. She picked up a marker and began to write. What appeared on that board was not a correction of human math. It was something entirely new. Mathematics operated on principles that humanity had never discovered, where human equations moved in straight lines, calculations curved and spiraled, where humans saw walls and limits, saw doors and possibilities. Watched with his mouth hanging open as filled the whiteboard, then another, then another. When she finally put down the marker, she turned to him with a small smile. "I believe I see your problem," she said. "You are trying to contain the reaction in a sphere, but the energy does not want to be a sphere. It wants to be a spiral. If you reshape your containment field like this," she pointed to her equations, "the reaction will stabilize itself. It will want to keep going." Stared at the equations. Then he ran to his computer and began entering calculations. His colleagues gathered around, talking in excited whispers that grew louder and louder. 3 months later, Earth achieved stable fusion power for the first time in human history. But did not stop there. She had spent her whole life alone in a tower with nothing to do but study. She had read every book in the royal library, learned every science her people possessed, mastered every form of mathematics known to her world. She had done this not because she enjoyed it, but because books were the only friends she was allowed to have. Now, all that knowledge became her gift to humanity. She worked with agricultural scientists, teaching them methods for treating soil that allowed crops to grow in deserts and wastelands. Regions that had struggled with famine for generations suddenly had food to spare. She sat with medical researchers, sharing knowledge of how cells regenerated after injury. Within a year, human doctors had developed new treatments for cancer that saved millions of lives. She helped engineers design better spacecraft engines, reducing the travel time to Mars from months to weeks. Human colonies on the Red Planet suddenly became practical instead of impossible dreams. News of these breakthroughs spread across the galaxy. The Galactic Council watched with growing concern as humanity's power and influence expanded with shocking speed. The species they had mocked as primitive children was suddenly advancing faster than civilizations 1,000 times their age. And at the center of it all was the cursed seventh daughter that King had thrown away like garbage. The king received daily reports of his daughter's activities, and each one made him angrier than the last. The fusion technology alone was worth more than entire star systems. The medical knowledge could have funded 100 wars. The agricultural techniques could have made him the savior of a dozen starving worlds. He had given all of this away to his enemies because he believed his daughter was worthless. One day, King summoned his advisors and announced his decision. He sent a formal demand to Earth, transmitted through official diplomatic channels so the entire galaxy could witness it. Princess must return to the Empire immediately, the message declared. She has stolen royal property by sharing state secrets with a foreign power. She is guilty of treason against the crown. If Earth does not return her within 30 standard days, the Empire will consider this an act of war. Ambassador Porter received the message while sitting in his office in Washington. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood. Then he called a meeting with Earth's leaders. They want her back, he told them. They say she stole from them by sharing her knowledge with us. That is ridiculous, said President Williams, a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. They gave her to us. Everything she shared as a free person making her own choices. You cannot steal what you freely give. They do not see it that way, Daniel replied. To them, everything a princess knows belongs to the crown. By sharing it without permission, she committed treason. So what are they going to do? Execute her? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Probably yes. At the very least, they will lock her away in an even darker hole than before. She will never see sunlight again. She will never have another friend. She will spend the rest of her life being punished for the crime of being kind. President Williams stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Washington stretched toward the horizon, its streets filled with people living their lives in peace. Fusion power had ended the energy wars that had plagued the planet for decades. New medical treatments had given millions of people hope, all because of one lonely princess who had never been shown kindness until she came to Earth. Send a response to King, the president said. Tell him that Princess is a guest and friend of humanity. Tell him that she has committed no crime because you cannot steal what you freely share. And tell him that if he wants her back, he will have to come and take her. Daniel nodded slowly. You understand what this means. They have one of the largest fleets in the galaxy. They could destroy us. President Williams turned to face him. Her eyes were calm and steady. Maybe they could, she said. But we will not hand over an innocent woman to be tortured and killed just because a bully is threatening us. That is not who we are. If they want a war, they will get one, and they will learn that humans protect their own. Daniel smiled despite the fear growing in his chest. I will send the message, Madam President. Far away, in her small house in Maine, sat at her kitchen table, teaching Grace how to solve math puzzles. She did not yet know that her father's warships were being prepared. She did not know that humanity was about to go to war for her. But when she found out, she would not run. She had finally found a family worth fighting for. The fleet arrived exactly 30 days after King's ultimatum. 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel just beyond Earth's moon, their dark hulls blocking out the stars like a swarm of metal locusts. Each ship was armed with weapons that could crack open a planet. Together, they carried enough firepower to turn Earth into a field of floating ash. King commanded the fleet from his flagship, a massive vessel called the Throne of Stars. He stood on his bridge, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on his screens, and felt confident in his victory. The humans had only 40 warships to defend their world. They were outnumbered 5-1. This battle would last perhaps an hour, maybe less. The Galactic Council had sent observers to watch the conflict. They floated at a safe distance, recording everything for the historical archives. Most of them had prepared statements of condolence to send to any surviving humans after the battle. A few had already begun dividing up Earth's colonies among themselves, assuming the humans would be too broken to defend their territory after their fall. No one expected what happened next. Admiral Christina commanded Earth's defense forces from the bridge of the starship Endurance. She was 62 years old, with silver hair cut short and a face lined by decades of service. She was a grandmother of 3, and she kept pictures of her taped to her console. She had promised them she would come home safely, and Christina did not break promises. She looked at the massive enemy fleet on her display and felt no fear. Fear was useless. Fear did not win battles. Only preparation, skill, and courage won battles. All ships activate cold drives, she ordered calmly. Engage formation Omega-7. The human fleet surged forward, and the universe changed. Dr. Cole's fusion technology had not just given Earth clean energy. It had also given them engines unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships could now accelerate faster and turn sharper than any vessel in recorded history. They moved like hummingbirds compared to the lumbering warships of the fleet. The first captain to encounter a human ship at full speed did not even have time to fire his weapons. One moment his sensors showed the enemy approaching. The next moment, that enemy was behind him and his engines were exploding. Admiral's ships danced through the formation like wolves among sheep. They struck and vanished, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Their weapons were not particularly powerful, but they did not need to be. A small knife in the right place does more damage than a big hammer that never lands. King watched in disbelief as his proud armada fell into chaos. His captains screamed for orders over the communication channels. Some ships tried to chase the faster human vessels and collided with their allies. Others fired blindly in all directions, hitting nothing but empty space and occasionally each other. "How is this possible?" demanded. Their technology was primitive. They were children playing with toys. His admiral, a veteran named, studied the tactical display with growing horror. "They have changed, Your Majesty. Their ships move in ways that should not be possible. Their targeting systems predict where we will be before we are there. This technology is not human." His 4 eyes widened as he understood. "My daughter gave them this." "It appears so, Your Majesty." The king slammed his fist against his throne. He had thrown away his own daughter, and she had given his enemies the keys to his defeat. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 112 ships had been destroyed or disabled. Their wreckage drifted through space like broken toys. The remaining 88 vessels had lost the will to fight and sat motionless, waiting to see what the humans would do next. Earth had lost only 3 ships against 200. Admiral opened a communication channel to the flagship. King's face appeared on her screen. He looked older than he had 6 hours ago. Defeat had a way of aging a person. "Your Majesty," said politely, "your fleet has been neutralized. You may retreat or you may continue fighting. The choice is yours, but I recommend retreat. My people have no desire to cause more death than necessary." "You dare show mercy," spat. "You have humiliated the Empire before the entire galaxy. Our honor demands we fight to the last ship. Then you will die here, and your empire will have no fleet left to protect it from your many enemies. Is that what you want? Is your pride worth more than the lives of every soldier under your command?" Said nothing. His hands gripped the arms of his throne so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. Admiral continued in a softer voice. "I am a grandmother, Your Majesty. I have 3 waiting for me back home. Every soldier in your fleet has someone waiting for them too. Parents, children, lovers, friends. Do not make them die for your pride. Go home. Tell your council what happened here. And every time you look at your daughter's empty chamber in your palace, remember the mistake you made." She paused, and something like warmth crept into her eyes. "Has learned to bake cookies, you know. She is terrible at it, but she is getting better. She asked me to give you a message. She said she forgives you for what you did to her. Personally, I think you do not deserve her forgiveness, but she is a better person than either of us." King stared at the human admiral for a long moment. Then slowly the fight went out of him. His shoulders sagged, his eyes dropped. "All ships," he said quietly, "prepare to withdraw. We are returning home." The fleet limped away from Earth, leaving behind the wreckage of their pride. The galactic observers recorded everything and sent it to 1,000 worlds. Within days, every species in the galaxy knew what had happened. The primitive humans had defeated one of the oldest empires in existence. The cursed 7th daughter had given them the tools for victory. Everything was changing. Back on Earth, watched the battle reports with Grace by her side. She had cried when she learned that humans were dying to protect her. She had offered to surrender herself to stop the fighting, but President Williams had refused. "You are one of us now," the president had said. "We do not abandon our people." Now, watching the fleet retreat, felt something she had never experienced before. She felt proud. Not proud of herself, but proud of the people who had accepted her when her own family had thrown her away. "They really fought for me," she whispered. Grace squeezed her hand. "Of course they did, you are family." Looked at her friend with tears in her eyes. Family. She had never had a real family before. Her father had seen her as a curse. Her mother had refused to look at her. Her siblings had pretended she did not exist. But now she had Grace, who made her soup when she was sad. She had Daniel, who had bowed to her when the whole galaxy was laughing. She had, who called her his greatest collaborator. She had Admiral, who had faced down 200 warships and called her a better person. She had humanity. And she would never let them down. 10 years had passed since the war, and the galaxy had become a very different place. The Galactic Council still met in the same grand chamber with the same floating chairs and towering pillars, but the balance of power had shifted in ways that no one had predicted. Where Earth had once sent a single nervous ambassador to sit in the corner and hope not to be noticed, humanity now commanded respect from every species in attendance. Stood at the entrance to the chamber, preparing to address the Council for the first time as Earth's Secretary of Interstellar Relations. It was the highest diplomatic position humanity had to offer, and she had earned it through years of hard work, wisdom, and quiet determination. She had changed so much since that day when she had been paraded before this same council like unwanted garbage. She was no longer the trembling princess who could not meet anyone's eyes. She stood tall now, confident in her own worth. Her silver-blue skin glowed with health, and her violet eyes sparkled with intelligence and warmth. She was also, against all expectations, a wife and mother. Dr. Cole had proposed to her 3 years after the war. He had done it badly, stumbling over his words and nearly dropping the ring into a cup of coffee. Had laughed until tears ran down her face, and then she had said yes. They had 3 children now, 2 daughters and a son, with silver-blue skin and their father's curious brown eyes. The oldest girl, named Hope, was already showing signs of her mother's talent for mathematics. The younger daughter, called Grace after her beloved aunt, wanted to be a starship captain. The boy, Daniel, was too young to have decided anything except that he loved cookies and hated bedtime. None of them were 7th born, but would have loved them just as fiercely if they had been. She took a deep breath and walked into the council chamber. The delegates rose as she entered, a sign of respect that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. She walked to the speaker's platform at the center of the room, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She remembered walking this same path 10 years ago, trembling with shame while the gallery laughed at her misfortune. No one was laughing now. "Thank you all for gathering today," began, her voice strong and clear. "I know that many of you remember the last time I stood in this chamber. I was brought here by my father as a joke, a cursed daughter given to primitive humans as an insult. You laughed at me that day. Some of you laughed very loudly." She paused and let her gaze sweep across the assembled delegates. Several of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I do not blame you for laughing. You believed what my people believed, that seventh daughters bring misfortune, that humans were too weak to matter. These were lies you had been told your whole lives. We all believe lies sometimes. The measure of a person is not whether they believe lies, but whether they are willing to change when they learn the truth." She clasped her hands before her and continued. "Humanity taught me that truth. They showed me that my supposed curse was nothing but superstition. They showed me that kindness is not weakness, that compassion is not foolishness. They took someone the galaxy had thrown away and gave her a home, a family, a purpose." Her voice softened, filled with emotion. "And look what happened. My knowledge helped them solve their energy crisis. My guidance helped them feed their hungry and heal their sick. My love for them inspired them to fight for me when my own father came to drag me back to darkness. This is what happens when you choose kindness over cruelty. This is what happens when you see value in those others have discarded." She gestured toward the doors of the chamber, where Ambassador Daniel Porter sat as an honored guest. He was old now, his hair white and his face lined with years. But his eyes were still sharp, and they glistened with tears as he watched his friend speak. "Ambassador Porter bowed to me when everyone else was laughing," said. "That bow changed my life. It was such a small thing, just a gesture of respect, but it meant everything to someone who had never received respect before, and it cost him nothing. Kindness costs nothing, but it can be worth more than gold." She turned back to face the full council. "I know many of you have watched humanity's rise with fear. You see our growing power and wonder if we will become the new tyrants of the galaxy. You wonder if we will treat you the way the old empires treated us." She shook her head slowly. "We will not. Humanity did not become strong by conquering others. We became strong by helping others, by sharing what we have, by lifting up those who were pushed down. This is not just strategy. This is who we are. This is who we choose to be." She took a step forward, her voice rising with passion. "Look at what we have done since the war. We have shared our fusion technology with any world that asked for it. We have sent doctors and teachers to colonies that had been abandoned by their former masters. We have welcomed refugees from a dozen conflicts and given them new homes. We have built not an empire but a community, and every year it grows larger and stronger." The chamber was completely silent. 1,000 aliens from 100 worlds listened to the cursed seventh daughter, who had become one of the most powerful people in the galaxy. "My father died last year," said quietly. "The empire is collapsing. His remaining children are fighting among themselves for scraps of a broken throne. Everything he built is crumbling because he built it on cruelty and fear. That is the fate of all empires built on such foundations. They fall, and no one mourns them." She lifted her chin proudly. "Humanity offers a different path. We offer partnership, not dominion. We offer help, not exploitation. We offer friendship, not fear. And we offer this to anyone willing to accept it, regardless of their species or their history." She spread her arms wide, a gesture of welcome. "Join us. Build something better with us. Not because you fear our weapons, but because you believe in what we are trying to create. A galaxy where seventh daughters are not thrown away. A galaxy where kindness is strength. a galaxy where everyone has value. She smiled, and it was a smile full of hard-won joy. That is the future humanity is building. That is the future I am proud to represent. And that future is open to all of you. She bowed to the assembly, the same deep bow of respect that Daniel Porter had shown her so long ago. Then she walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a room full of aliens who had much to think about. Daniel met her outside, and she hugged him tightly. "You were wonderful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I learned from the best," she replied. They walked together through the halls of the council building, past delegates who nodded respectfully as they passed. Outside, a transport waited to take them back to Earth, where Grace would be watching the speech on the news with and the children. As stepped onto the transport, she paused and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was the cold gray world where she had spent her childhood locked in a tower, told every day that she was worthless. That girl seemed like a stranger now. That girl had never known what it meant to be loved. But this woman, this wife and mother and leader, knew exactly what love was. She had learned it from humans who had shown her kindness when they had nothing to gain. She had learned it from friends who had fought for her when it would have been easier to surrender. She had learned it from a species that believed everyone deserved respect, even cursed seventh daughters who the galaxy had thrown away. The transport lifted off and pointed toward Earth. Went home to her family. And somewhere, watching from a quiet corner of the universe, the stars themselves seemed to smile.